10:30 p.m. here in Paris, and time to take a closer look at one of our main stories this evening. This is apropos. Well, the US federal court has just issued a temporary restraining order limiting the deployment of National Guard troops to the streets of Los Angeles after they and 700 Marines were sent to the city by President Donald Trump. The ruling came after California Governor Gavin Newsom filed an emergency motion to block those deployed from assisting with immigration raids. With the very latest, here's Yinka Oyetade.
The US military put the final touches on a rare deployment. 700 Marine soldiers set to head to Los Angeles to back up federal immigration authorities. They're part of a growing military presence in the city. Thousands of National Guard troops have already been sent in by the Trump administration, a move California's leaders have blasted as inflammatory and unnecessary. But President Donald Trump is standing by his decision.
You would have had a horrible situation had I not sent them in. Horrible. You'd be reporting on a lot of death and a lot of destruction that's not going to take place. I think if you look, every night it got less and less. They were met with very strong force, the bad people, the bad, sick people that do what they do.
US Marines are normally deployed to assist in major disasters like that of Hurricane Katrina or 9/11. Rarely are they used for domestic policing. The protests in LA, sparked by a series of ICE immigration raids, escalated over the weekend with demonstrators blocking a major freeway and setting cars alight. But on Monday, the situation was far less raucous. State officials say the president's dire warnings don't match reality. For many protesters, the goal is to express their opposition to the recent raids. The mayor is calling on the president to stop them.
I'm going to put out a call to him today. I have been talking to... I want to tell him to stop the raids. I want to tell him that this is a city of immigrants. I want to tell him that if you want to devastate the economy of the city of Los Angeles, then attack the immigrant population.
The recent deployments are expected to cost $130 million, a figure that has raised eyebrows. But Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth insists the deployment is vital to protect federal immigration agents on the ground.
For more, let's bring in Ian Reifowitz, author and professor of historical studies at Empire State University at the State University of New York. Ian, thanks so much for being with us this evening. We've just seen in the last few minutes a US federal court has issued a temporary restraining order limiting the deployment of these National Guard troops to the streets of LA. Many questions have been asked over the last few days about whether or not what Donald Trump is trying to do here is actually lawful. So what do you take from that ruling coming down to us from the federal court? Is there a legal justification for sending these troops into LA?
Well, the Constitution and the prior practice has been that governors request National Guard troops. Now, this is not something that we've never seen before. But it's a huge bar to overcome, to have the president send in National Guard troops without the approval of a governor or local officials. Historically, there was the example in 1963 when President Kennedy sent the National Guard to help desegregate school in the South. But I don't think we can look at these situations, these protests that we have in LA, and say that they are a threat to our society, a threat to our Constitution, a threat to our democracy, the way southern states, violating the desegregation orders were. That was an example where the president had to overcome, had to ignore or not wait for a state official to request the National Guard because those state officials were acting in true bad faith. That's not the case here with Governor Newsom in California. And that's why I believe that this court issued this injunction, because there really was no justification, no legal justification for the president to send in these troops without the request of the governor of California.
No legal justification, as you say, then. So does this, Ian, suggest to you that confrontation is actually part of Donald Trump's strategy here as president?
I think it's hard to deny that that's the case. This is a president who has repeatedly employed a strategy of conflict, political conflict, let's say, certainly, he wants to keep he wants to be at the center of attention. He wants to be controlling the political narrative. He wants to be controlling the media narrative. There have been some things in the last week that have not looked good for Trump. His very public breakup with Elon Musk, for example. He has a bill moving through the Congress right now that, according to polling, is quite unpopular, as people recognize that it essentially is cutting health care and other benefits for working and lower income people, essentially to provide funds to cut taxes for wealthy people. That's not a good look for Donald Trump. Well, here is a way for him to distract from that bad news, looking tough, looking strong. Democratic officials have certainly talked about this as an attempt by Trump to change the narrative and to put a different issue in front of the American people and in front of the media, one where he thinks he's got more of the American people on his side. That is namely the issue of the border, of undocumented immigrants, and of his attempt to deport as many of them as he is able to. That he sees as a winning issue. And so the other winning issue is standing up, in his words, certainly in his words, standing up to violent protesters. The issue is that while there has been some scattered violence, there really hasn't been very much of it. It has, as France 24 just reported, it lessened today, certainly. It lessened Monday. These troops are there to provide Donald Trump with political credibility at a time that I think he really needs it.
And Ian, some commentators are pointing out that this kind of cycle that we see, protest, violence, then repression, it often benefits the political right. Is that something that you'd agree, and is that something that Donald Trump is bearing in mind during all of this?
I do agree. One thing that the American people and people in any society generally fear is chaos. So to present oneself, as Donald Trump is doing, as the champion of order and the opponent of chaos is something that will almost inevitably gain him support. But it is, I think, also reflective of his view of the role of the presidency. He has a view of the role of the presidency as one that is almost all-powerful. He believes that it should be able to operate almost without restraint in a way that he was unable to do during his first term, because he was surrounded by people like General Mark Milley, like Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, other officials, even on the economic front, who sought to restrain him. Those people are not in his administration right now. So he has essentially surrounded himself with people who see their role singularly as carrying out his commands, as helping him to achieve what he wants. In terms of commentators, I read a quite chilling commentary today by Michelle Goldberg of the New York Times, who said, quote, "There's no sidestepping a president deploying the military in an American city based on ludicrous falsehoods about a foreign invasion. Indeed, it's hard to think of a clearer signpost on the road to dictatorship." That's in the New York Times by Michelle Goldberg, and I think that's something that should give everybody pause.
And Ian, what should Democrats be doing, and how are Democrats reacting? Because there's a fine line really between condemning the raids, these ICE raids and the National Guard deployment, while also opposing violence against law enforcement officials. What do you make of the response from Democrats?
It is a fine line. I think Gavin Newsom has done a good job. He's been very energetic. He and other prominent Democrats have clearly condemned any of the violence that's out there. That's very important. You saw Joe Biden do that in 2020 in the George Floyd protest, which had some scattered, certainly some violence, although the large majority of the protests were peaceful. Here, the overwhelming majority of the protests are peaceful. But it is important to state clearly that Democrats have to state clearly that violence is unacceptable, and then they can pivot to talking about raids of schools, raids of hospitals, raids of courthouses are all dangerous in terms of their reflecting arguably an out-of-control federal government, and also talking about the importance of protecting the right to peaceful protest. Americans have that right. It is a core freedom that we have the right to peacefully protest in this country, to peacefully assemble in this country. So they have to draw that line. but they also have to make sure that they are standing up for American values, and they have to talk about standing up for American values. And they also have to do what Mayor Karen Bass did, talk about standing up to protect the economy. If you suddenly remove all the undocumented workers from the American economy, you would not have a functioning economy right now. That doesn't mean that this is not an issue that has to be dealt with, but it's one that has to be dealt with properly and comprehensively, rather than in a series of haphazard raids that I think Democrats are doing a good job of opposing in the right way.
And Ian, a US federal court, as we've been reporting, has issued, temporary limits to the deployment of these National Guard troops, to the deployment of these Marines. What do you think is going to happen now? How's Donald Trump going to respond to all of that?
Well, he's going to take his appeal to the next level and the next level. And what we've seen is that while not 100% of the time, for the most part, the Supreme Court has sided with this president, even in ways that or in parallel, in terms of parallel cases where they did not side with President Biden, they have sided with President Trump. I think he is counting on them to deliver victories to him in terms of his view of the power of the presidency. Now, it may not get that far. If he has a sense that he doesn't really need to push the point, he could pull the federal troops out, he could pull the Marines out before it even gets to the Supreme Court. But he is definitely going to appeal. We know that. And we've seen a number of lower court rulings go against him, in particular very recently on trade, and then higher level courts have overturned the lower court decision. So this is far from over.
Ian, thanks so much for joining us. We'll have to leave it there for now. That's Ian Reifowitz, author and professor of historical studies at Empire State University. Well, that's it from us for now. Do stay with us, though, for more world news on France 24.